Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guide. This is another episode of the C programming series, and in this video we are going to implement the functionality that allows us to deposit into our account. So in order to start, what I'm going to do is display just a new message to the user to say D to deposit into an account, and then we are going to say else if command is equal to D, which means we are basically going to add another condition here and call a deposit function. This deposit function I've already created. It's the declaration in functions.h, just the function header, and in functions.c I have created the definition which is currently empty. And what we can do is, for depositing, there can, if our IDs were continuous or we were not storing it on based on particular IDs, what we could do is just load the file basically, and set our file pointer to a specific place within the file and basically write it there. But since our IDs can change and might not always be in the perfect order, we can't actually do that. What we instead must do is we must read the whole file, then find the account with the particular ID, and then deposit into that account and then read the whole file again. And this is basically the way we are doing it in the delete function and the other functions, and this is basically the way we are going to do it in this function as well. So let's go ahead and start that. Now what you might initially be tempted to do might be to just go and copy the functionality of the read all and delete function, just copy them into deposit as well. But copying code is generally bad. If you are copying a single piece of code over and over again, it's generally a better idea to put it in a say a specific function. So we have currently got our functions.c and functions.h file, which consist of all of the functions that the user is actually going to interact with. But we are going to I have created two new files here, which is util.h and util.c, which will consist a bunch of helper functions for our basically in use inside of the functions.c file. So in util.h I'm going to create a hashtag include functions.h, and then I'm going to create a function which returns a not void but a account underscore t pointer, and it's called read accounts, or let's say read all accounts. And it is actually it returns a pointer, which means it will return just really an array of accounts. So we will use a const character pointer, which essentially means a string that cannot be changed. So character pointer is obviously means an array of characters, which is what a string is, but this requires it to be an actual allocated array. But if we put const here, that means it is a constant thing, and we can put literal values in there as well. So we are going to say a const char pointer which is a string called file name, to just to make it a bit more flexible. And let's go under util.c and let's go ahead and include util.h and also implement this function. Currently what we are going to do is we are going to basically copy the implementation from that file and paste it here. Of course we need to return the accounts and make sure we include stdio and stdlib.h, and after that this is going to work. And let's go under functions.c, and in here we are going to replace whatever we got in the delete method by account underscore t pointer accounts, and we'll set that to read all accounts, and we will pass the accounts.dat name. Now up here we are going to go ahead and include util.h here, of course, because we want to make sure that we actually have it. Now it's currently giving a couple of errors. Firstly, let's make sure that we define the file pointer again, because it's not already defined. The next problem is that the size variable does not exist. But the problem is that the size we create, we just keep it here and we don't return it. But you can't return multiple values, of course. You might want to create a struct called account array and then put that in here. But there can be an easier way to do it, which involves passing values by reference. That essentially means that we pass a pointer to a variable, and then the functions will change that variable. In that way we can have more than one return value. So we are going to create a size underscore t pointer called size, and of course we want to make sure we include stdlib.h here, so that size underscore t is already defined, and that's a pointer. And we are going to go here and we are going to essentially create a size underscore t pointer called size here as well. We are going to change that implementation, and in here we are just going to use that instead of creating a new variable. We are just going to use the old one, and this is essentially going to work. We can read all accounts like that. And in functions.c what we will change is that we will create a size underscore t called size, and we will just pass a reference to that so that the function can change it. And we will also replace it in the read all function, so that we have basically that makes our code a lot more compact. Now for the actual implementation of the deposit function, we are going to of course use the similar functionality to get that, and then we will create a variable called id and set that to -1. Then we will ask the user to enter account id, and we will scan that id just we do normally. But we are going to run a for loop here, of course, for the number of elements we have got. Just compare each id, and let's say if the accounts i.id is equal to the id that the user entered, then we are going to print enter amount to deposit, and then we can create a float called deposit amount and set that to 0 by default. And then we are going to scan with f and which means float, and then we are going to pass it the address of our deposit amount. Then we can basically go accounts I dot balance, and we can add the deposit to it, and then we can break that, and then in here in the end we can say if our id is equal to -1 still, then we can give an error to the user. So the problem is that if the user enters an invalid id, it might not be -1. So what we are going to do is we are going to let me first complete the error message here. What we are going to do is we are going to go up here and say int found is equal to 0. This integer means a boolean or a condition, essentially 0 is false, and if we find an id, we will set it to 1. And this break statement makes sure that as soon as we found an id, we just exit the loop so that we don't keep running it. And then we are going to say if not found, then we are going to print that error. And in the end, of course, we want to write that, but there can actually be an optimization here. If we actually read the file and we do not deposit anything, then that means that we essentially should not write the file again, because that because currently if we write the file again, that means we are essentially writing the same file back to that if the user entered an invalid id. However, if we change it so that we only write the file if the user actually enters a valid id, which means the accounts actually change, then we are going to write that. So what we can do is we can actually remove this conditional statement, and then what we can do is we can basically put this here just without anything. We will put an error message here without any conditions and remove this as well. And this break statement, we will change that to a return. The reason is that we will just stop the function at that moment, and here we can actually write the file. We all are pretty familiar with how this goes. We create a file pointer fp and set it to fopen and accounts.dat, and just say write binary, and here we just write the whole accounts array passing the size of account t, and of course the size actual amount of elements in that array, and then we pass fp, and that should write all of the accounts correctly. And there's a problem here. I am actually adding the id here, which is obviously wrong. We need to add the deposit amount to the balance. And also in util.c, we want to make sure that we actually use the file name instead of using a hard-coded value when we are opening the file, and this should essentially do it. And if you remember, our makefile should automatically detect that a new file has been created here. So if I go ahead and run like minggw32 make actually, not c++, so make, if I run that, what you should see is that it compiles function.c, and once it has done that, it should compile util.c as well. It takes a little bit of time to compile generally, and you can see it it does give a problem here, which says that passing argument 3 of fread makes integer from a pointer without a cast. Now the reason that error occurred is because if I go in util.c, we are passing this here directly, but we need to dereference it, or else it will actually try to take the address of whatever value is contained inside, which will cause problems. So let's go ahead and firstly let's just clear this screen. So clear like that, and now let's go ahead and run that again, and it should hopefully give no warnings. Now if I read all accounts, what you can see is that we have got John and Tom here, and if I try to deposit, and for the ID I'm just going to say 3 for Tom, and for the account let me just say 200. And if I do that, and then if I read the files yeah, if I read that again, it did not actually work. You can see it just gave name, ID, balance like that, and did not work. The only reason it did that was because we want to make sure that we close the file, or else it won't allow other functions to open it if we are already using it. So in the end, we want to make sure we close the file. That's only the mistake, and it has written the file correctly, and we still have got it. So if I just make sure to close it after this, and let me just clear the screen once more. and let's run this. And what you should see is that if I read now, you can see this has got 700 balance. And if I try to deposit again in say ID 0 and I try to enter 50, and then that should cause it to work as well. Let me first clear the terminal so that you can see it more clearly, and I'm going to run this account again, and you can see that it does have 150 here indeed. And if we try to deposit and we enter an ID that does not exist, you can see no account with ID 2 was found, and this means our system is working quite efficiently. So this is pretty much it for this video. In the next video we will implement the withdrawing functionality, so stay tuned for that. I will see you in the next one. Make sure to like and subscribe as well, and bye.